Well, hi everybody, it's Adam's Music Box here, and today I want to talk about the subject of death, particularly how it relates to music. Now, multiple musicians from every genre conceivable have considered the topic, composed about it, sung about it, played about it. And we'll cover those in due course. But today I want to talk about specifically European classical music and some of the pieces that I think are the most emotive, the most meaningful, and the most powerful on the subject, at least to me. I want to start with what is probably, if I had to name just one, my most beloved piece on that subject of all. And this is Death and Transfiguration by Richard Strauss. You will frequently see it printed in German, which is Tod und Verklärung. And this piece is unique because it covers all of the emotions that surround the subject of death. And it does so without preaching or patronizing the audience, the listener. It does so in a way that's so sincere, yet so original. And I don't just mean original in a musical sense, I mean musical in its profoundly philosophical approach to this subject that one way or another is going to affect us all, and obviously does affect us even when we're living because of the horrors that we see around us. The piece begins very quietly and then builds up to a storm-like crescendi. And notably, it finishes on a major chord that really is a symptom, I think, of the Strauss of that period's optimism about life coming full circle and about the death leading to a spiritual transfiguration, not only for the person that one is mourning, but for all of those around us. Also unique about this piece, there are some pieces about this subject that really one can only listen to on a funereal type of occasion, a time of mourning, where this piece is a piece that, even though it's got a very clear programmatic feature, it can be listened to at any time and any place. And it's quite uplifting, it's quite comforting. And that's frankly what a lot of people seek, desire, and need. So I can't recommend that enough for this or any occasion. My favorite recordings are those conducted by Mengelberg and those recorded by Furtwängler. And I'll, of course, as I do with the classical videos, put links to those in the description below. Next, I want to talk about Bruckner's Seventh Symphony, the slow movement in particular. This movement has been used in many funerals throughout the ages because it's very mournful and it's very powerful. And Bruckner himself, while he didn't name his symphonies, they were numbered absolute music, if you will. Those who surrounded Bruckner and that came from his culture, and those who shared his very deep Roman Catholic faith, tend to see this particular movement of the Seventh Symphony as something very fitting for a funeral, particularly of those that we care deeply about, those who have had an impact on us, because it's very impactful. It's very tense, and like all Bruckner music, it's about cycles of motifs and chords, and frankly, things that go beyond either of those technical terms, cycles of feeling that he gives to the audience that rise and fall. The tension tightens, loosens, and resolves in something mysterious and interesting and beautiful. And he accomplishes this with all of his great symphonies, but this, of all of his many moving pieces of music, is typically associated with funereal occasions, potentially more than any other. Next, oh, and of course, my favorite performance of this, if you hadn't guessed, is by the great Furtwängler. Again, I'll put that in the description. Next, I want to go to the German Requiem of Brahms, which is very unique because it was written for occasions that could be secular as well as religious, should a clerical institution, should a church agree to it. But it wasn't written in the traditional Roman Catholic Requiem style. It wasn't, the lyrics weren't sung in Latin. They were sung in the modern German of Brahms's time. And the piece, because of all of those things, is very much a direct requiem. Many requiems, Mozart's, for example, which we'll get to in a minute, are very ethereal, where Brahms is very direct. It explores the human side of suffering and loss, which probably isn't surprising because it was dedicated to his late mother. The second movement is in many ways the most stirring and powerful, but the entire piece is really quite moving. It's very lengthy, it's very involved, but it leaves the listener with a sense of weight being taken off one's shoulder because of that journey on which the composer takes you. Mengelberg and Furtwängler both recorded very different but very astoundingly compelling versions of this, and so I'll put those in the description for you as well. And finally, we get to the mother of all requiems, the very controversial, because of its provenance, Mozart Requiem, but discussions about its origins aside, it's a beautiful traditional religious requiem used for many occasions, the death of many important figures, both in Mozart's time and more contemporarily, when President John Kennedy was assassinated. The piece that was chosen for the funeral was, of course, the Requiem, and RCA Victor released a recording of that in their Living Stereo series, which of course sounds marvelous. My favorite of all, though, in terms of performance, is that of Karl Böhm, one of the finest of all the Mozartians, and I'll also put a link to that in the description. So to summarize it, my personal favorite is Death and Transfiguration, composed by Strauss, then the slow movement of the Seventh Symphony of Anton Bruckner, then the German Requiem of Johannes Brahms, and then Mozart's Requiem itself. There are many other pieces that we can talk about in this genre and beyond, and by that I mean the genre of European classical music dealing with death, and other genres that deal with it. I'm going to add one more as a kind of asterisk, because this one I find bereft of hope in some ways, but also very spiritually contemplative in others. This was a piece written by a composer facing down his own death. And so there's a kind of pathos within it, but a deeply sincere pathos that we might not encounter in these other pieces. And this is, of course, the sixth and final symphony of Peter Tchaikovsky, his Pathétique, as it is called. Very, very difficult to listen to, not because it's not musically beautiful, it is, but because you can feel the sorrow and self-mourning in it. A classic, nevertheless. I think Nikolai Golovnev is the best conductor to take his approach to that piece, and I'll put that in the description for you as well. Hopefully we'll be back next time with a cheerier subject, but since this is something that we all deal with, I thought I'd tackle it today. Subscribe and like and share with friends and the rest of it. Bye-bye.